Hi, it's Kevin Lobates here, and today I want to talk about Bitcoin transaction fees. Now, transaction fees are nothing new. You may have seen small shops saying that they won't accept transactions under $5 for credit card payments because the transaction cost to them would then be higher than the profit they make from selling their goods. So Bitcoin has transaction fees, and the idea is that eventually when mining ends and all the Bitcoin is gone out of the block reward, then the miners will cope by charging transaction fees. Now, the thing to do here is to think of a Bitcoin transaction as like a check. So Americans will be familiar with this, maybe millennials will have to go and look it up. But a check is basically a piece of paper where you write down an amount of money, you sign it, and you hand it over to the person you're paying, and then you've completed the transaction, they send the check up to the bank, and the bank clears it, and the money's taken out of your account and put into their account. So a Bitcoin transaction is exactly the same as a check, right down to the fact that you sign it, and there's a transaction fee associated with it. Now, a typical Bitcoin transaction is about 250 bytes in length, and at the moment the transaction fees work out at about 25 to 30 satoshis per byte. So it's about 7,000 satoshis, which at current day prices is about $1 in order to get your transaction submitted. And the fact is, it doesn't matter whether you're transferring pennies or satoshis, or whether you're transferring huge amounts of value through the Bitcoin system, the transaction fee ends up being about the same. Because what you're doing with your transaction fee is you're bidding to get your transaction included in the next block. And if you make it a bit lower, you'll probably make it into the second or third or fourth block after you submit it, because blocks aren't always able to be filled. There's only so many transactions that can be fitted into each block. And if there's a lot of transactions, then you can speed up the processing of yours by paying a higher transaction fee. And if there aren't many transactions going on, then you can drop your transaction fee. And fortunately, things like the Bitcoin Core software kind of dynamically compute what a good amount to offer in order to get your transaction included should be. So then you submit your transaction. It has the transaction fee, which is a small amount off the top if you're submitting a reasonable amount of value, and it gets processed, and the miner gets to keep that transaction fee. Now, $1 per transaction is high. It means that you can't really use Bitcoin to pay for a coffee when a coffee is $2, because who wants to pay an extra dollar on top in order to have their payment accepted? But really, this is why I think that Bitcoin is positioning itself, possibly unintentionally, as a replacement for gold, because the fact is that you can equally transmit 10 million bitcoins, billions of dollars, and the transaction will only cost you $1. Whereas, for example, a year ago I had to transmit $1,000 over to New York, and the cheapest I could do it was $75, and it took 4 days to arrive. Now, with Bitcoin, you could transmit theoretically 10 or 20 billion dollars worth of value in 10 minutes for a cost at the moment of $1 or $2. And at its peak, I think transaction fees got up to about $30 or $40 when it was really, really jam-packed and so many people were trying to transact at the same time. So that's a quick summary of what transaction fees are all about, how they're computed. There are some clever things you can do, because you can batch transactions and you can take lots of inputs from different addresses. So if you have addresses with what's called dust, small quantities in Satoshi of value, you can actually suck them into the main transaction, and it doesn't actually cost you that much extra. But there you go, that's a summary of transactions. Hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you in the next video soon. Bye for now.